Ana Moadet. Yo nací en Catamarca, una provincia de Argentina, una provincia un poco más pobre que Córdoba y que Buenos Aires. Es del norte, zona montañosa y seca. Vivía en un pueblito muy chiquito y también bastante humilde, digamos, con gente pobre.
I'm Ana Mohamed. I was born in Catamarca, in the north of Argentina. It's mountainous and dry. I lived in a tiny little village. It was quite humble, you could say, with poor folk, country folk. They cut trees, made coal, hunted rats and rabbits. I came to Córdoba to study at secondary school because there wasn't one in my village. I was one of the few. There were only 3 or 4 families in this village that could afford to do this. So I came to Córdoba in 1969, and 2 months later there was what became known as the Cordobazo. That's a popular revolt. There were a lot of workers who took part, and it condensed the spirit of the 70s into a sense of liberation, better and more equal conditions, and it called for a revolution, a socialist revolution. This is more or less how you could summarize it. Well, I saw that, and I thought a lot, and compared the workers in the street protesting with the people from my own village, back there in conditions of poverty. And I felt a tie, a bond, unity, as something that told me I should be there by their side. I was very young. I was 11 years old. I was growing up there, my pre-adolescence. And at this time, adolescence came much earlier than it does today. My 12 years then was very different from a 12-year-old now. I had a lot more responsibility. I had to get my own food, wash my own clothes. I was alone there, without my parents. I had to go to school and come home without anyone to get me up in the morning or get me dinner or check up on me. Nothing. And this leads to a very different perception of adolescence. This time, between when I was 12 and 20 years old, I lived the process of a growing popular movement, people in the street demanding their rights, thinking that a better world was possible, believing that we would achieve socialism immediately. And socialism meant healthcare for everyone, education for everyone, housing for everyone. That was what it was. I think it's a utopia that's really beautiful. And furthermore, we thought that it was possible, and that it was possible immediately, there and then, that it just needed a little push to make it happen. And so I joined this movement. And for me, it was the loveliest thing that I could do with my life. And there was another thing. It was like when your life takes on a really strong meaning, and this renews the energy you have to do things. I was studying cinema at the time, and I wanted to study really hard and make really good films, because I wanted to make films for this cause. It wasn't about being the best director. It was about making films for this cause. It's really nice to think in these terms when you have such a beautiful objective. But then in 1974, then I began to see that it wasn't going to be so easy. That not everybody thought that this world we wanted was the better one. And that to insist on going ahead meant maybe risking a lot, because there were people who were taking up arms to oppose us. We had no idea of the dimensions of what was going to happen. I'd lived through other military governments. I'd lived through other coups d'etats, but never of this dimension. Nothing of this kind of terrible, of terror, of terrorism. Perhaps also because this time we'd actually come close to becoming a different kind of country. And so to stop this, you had to annihilate in earnest. Perhaps. I say I'm not certain. I'm just saying it's possible. Personally, after the coup, over the days immediately afterwards, the 24th, 25th, 26th of March, I knew at once that this time it was something different. On the 24th of March, a girl who was living with me, they killed her. On the 25th, I find out they've killed someone else. On the 26th, they tell me that others have been killed. And what's more, seeing the military take over the streets, seeing the tanks, the planes, the army spread throughout a city that goes to being a taken city. Well, this had become a different country. This was something else. And it came from the state, with the full force of the state, and with all the equipment of the state, in the street, killing, without having to pay any price for it. For me personally, for many of us who had been working politically, it was very difficult to know what to do, you know, and, well, we didn't know what else to do, but carry on with the same things we had been doing. Me, right then, I had my partner, who was a Montonero. In July 76, they abducted him. Other friends, who were part of the Students' Union, who were even younger than me, they'd also all been abducted. You know, this was the panorama that surrounded you back then. And in November of 76, they abducted me. I was walking down the street together with two other friends. I think we must have had a young look about us, you know, and that kind of defiance that you always have when you're young. We were very careful at this time of how we dressed, but anyway, we were three young people walking down the street at a time when it was practically forbidden to walk in a group, and I saw the cars coming with plainclothes police, and they opened the doors and pulled out their guns and, well, they blindfolded us, gagged us, tied our hands and legs, and, well, they put me in the boot of one car, and the others were put into different cars. And when they closed the boot, and I was inside, you know, like this and this and this, tied up, and I said, I don't want to die. I can't let this happen. And so when the car began to set off, I untied this and I untied this and I untied this, and I began desperately to try to open that boot. And I curled myself up into a tiny, tiny little ball like a hedgehog, and I threw myself out, and I began to run, and I could hear the cars, the screech of car brakes, bang, 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 and the shots, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and there were the cars coming, and I began to stop the cars. Please pick me up, let me get in, or they'll take me. And when a car stopped and I was about to get in, they opened fire, and so the car moved off. So I continued running until they caught me by the hair, and they hit me. I'd been heading towards a lorry that had stopped, and I'd almost reached it when they caught me. Of course, they beat me unconscious, and they threw me on top of one of the other boys who'd been with us. I woke up after a bit, and exchanged a few words with this boy, until they grabbed me again, and put a bag over my head. And when I woke up later in the Perla death camp. I don't want to talk much about the Perla because it's the most terrible place where they torture. I saw deaths and everything else. After 12 days, they took me away from the Perla and they transferred me to another concentration camp called the Rivera. And I stayed there for about the same, 10 days, more or less, because what they do a lot in this camp is they allow you to recover a bit physically, you know, because I was really sore. Well, I was quite destroyed physically. So they left me there for about 10 days, so that my body could heal a bit. And afterwards, they took me to the prison. the military held 3 military tribunals for me, and they tried me, just like a court-martial, you know, as if it were a war. And so the soldiers, without a judge or a barrister, you don't have anything, a soldier came along and said to me, "They've told me I've got to defend you." And he put a pistol here to my head. And there I was, with a hood over my head, hands chained, and I can feel a pistol up against my skull. And he says, "I am your defender in this trial. As far as I'm concerned, you should be dead. But they've ordered me to defend you." You know, this was the system. And they asked for the death penalty for me. And so they had to see it through. But it's never been legalized in this country. The commander, Menendez, he wanted to use this as a way to implement it. And these people were supposed to be the signees, but no one dared to sign it. So the court was disbanded. And so they organised another one. The same thing all over again in 1978. They took me there again, hooded, legs bound, hands bound, military lorry, guns all around. They took me back to the same place, get me down off the truck, 500 soldiers all around, and they say court-martial, and then again death sentence, and again they make a complete mess up of it because nobody wanted to be the one to sign. You understand? And then again a third military tribunal, and again the same thing, until they stopped having military tribunals and passed me over to the federal justice system. Why all of this? Because not only Amnesty International was putting pressure on them and asking about me, but also the OAS. When the Organization of the American States came in 1979, I think, when they entered the prison, they asked, "Who is Ana Mohamed?" And they came with my case in hand. You understand? So in St. Martin's prison, they didn't let international organizations in. But after a lot of pressure, in 1978, at the end of 1978, the Red Cross International did manage to enter the prison. But the day before they came, the military took me and other prisoners out of the prison. The soldiers came to get us from our cells, and they put hoods on us and took us to the Rivera detention camp. They beat us and warned that if we said one single word about what we'd seen or lived through when we saw the Red Cross the next day, they'd kill us. And then they told us, "Hey, you know those guys from the Red Cross, they're Yankees, gringos, Europeans. What have they got to do with you? I thought you were freedom fighters. And those people are imperialists," you know, as if we were as thick as 2 planks. So this time, something really wonderful happened. That time they took us there. They told us, you know, we were in this really scanty room. At least, you know, that was the sensation we had, because we were blindfolded with hoods over us, yeah? And all of us were there, up against the wall. There was my friend Sarah, me, another girl, and 11 men, all of us in this room, with the soldiers hitting us and shouting, "You lot don't even know how to sing the national anthem. Let's hear you. Go on, sing it." And so we began to sing the national anthem, getting louder and louder, giving each other strength. And the soldiers began to tell us to stop. And each time they did, we just sang even louder. Because the national anthem contains a verse that goes, how does it go? Wait, because I want to tell it to you right. It goes, "You have to fight for freedom or die with glory." Die, you know. And so this part, we sang it so loudly. And the soldiers beat us to make us stop. And so we did stop when the blows got too much. But this sensation of having sung our national anthem loudly with the others, oh, it felt really, really good. The next day, in order to see the Red Cross, they took us out of the prison section and to a little office with a guard standing outside, controlling how much time each one of us spent inside. They put us in a queue and we entered. We were scared because we knew that there could be microphones inside. But what's more, we'd already had a bit of a discussion. There were inmates who were very scared, because afterwards, well, it was okay for the Red Cross, you know, who'd go away, but we just had to stay where we were. Even so, above all, as women, we'd been getting together, and we arranged that we'd each say a little bit, so that no one person would stay a long time and others only a little. And so to avoid that feeling of being alone, we would each, I spoke about the food, someone else about the beatings, someone else about how it was that they wouldn't let us keep in touch with relatives, someone else, you know, each one of us narrated a little bit about life in the prison, about part of the torture or one of the concentration camps, and someone else about another one. And so we distributed everything. And that was really, really good. Because already when we arrived there, everybody had practiced their little bit. And if there were 2 or 3 who weren't brave enough, well, we still gave a general overview of how things were. And the Red Cross said that they realised that there was something terrible going on, because they'd heard the stories. And it was the first time we had had the sensation that someone in the world was doing something for us. Because at this time, we were completely cut off from outside, incomunicado. And just the possibility that somebody could send a message to our families saying after 2 years of being imprisoned, isolated, incomunicado, I'm alive. Tell my families that I'm well. You know, this was really good. So good. And my parents, for them, that a letter arrived from the Red Cross saying, I've kept the letter. You know, it's just 5 lines that say, we've been with Ana Maria, she's well, she sends her greetings, and says that if they'll allow you, you could send some contact lenses or something like that. And this, for my parents, this was the certificate that I was alive. And so this too, it was so good, so good. My mum had a folder in which she used to keep these letters, and then later, because after a few years, we began to have contact with the ordinary prisoners, and I used to speak to them using my hand, you understand, with sign language. Our section was here, you see, and the section where they kept the ordinary prisoners was over there. And there was a window, which of course we'd been ordered to keep shut. But there were times, so for example, when 2 other inmates would look out for me, that there was no guard coming, and I'd open the window, and then I had a little hole, and I could see an ordinary prisoner in the distance who was at the other window, and so I would speak using my hands, with sign language, that I learnt in prison. In prison I learnt sign language, Morse code, the lot. And I would sign and say, and then they would say, yeah, they were allowed visits. And so I would say, get a message home for me. Tell them that the prisoners are well. Say that so-and-so is alive, so-and-so is sick, so-and-so is about to give birth, you understand? Tell them that they've brought one more girl. She's called so-and-so, and she's in the prison with us. And so this is what we began to do. And later, with another strange system that happens in prisons, they managed to pass us paper little paper, like cigarette paper, the inside of a little pen, and we make little books out of them and write letters, very well hidden, and make them tiny into things we'd call sweets, and then get them back to the ordinary prisoners, clandestinely, obviously. And then they'd get them out and get them to one of their relatives, who would get them to one of our relatives. And we use nicknames to do this, obviously. I used to use a nickname that my mum and dad had given me when I was a tiny kid. And so if the letter fell into a soldier's hands, they couldn't know that it was me. Because if I signed it Anna and they got hold of it, well, they'd just come and get me and it'd be click. The concentration camp is the strongest expression of appropriation of one person with power over another, to decide over another, even their life, and to say, I'll kill you, good for nothing, I'll stab you, I'll prick you, I'll break you. But sometimes in life, without reaching these extremes, people still decide over others. You have rights, and you don't have rights. And the concentration camp is extreme. But I think it was Primo Levi who said that when a concentration camp is founded, it isn't built just on this terrain. When it exists, it extends across the whole society. And a place for reflection is possible only if it exists in the whole of society. It can't just exist as an island. It's only possible to build up these places as places for reflection when the whole of society wishes to reflect upon the concept of the other, how they consider another person. It's not just about those who are already dead, but about today. How do I relate to the boy who's out on the street, unemployed, to the guy without work, to those who are marginalised, who I consider different because he's Jewish, he's homosexual, she's lesbian, I don't know what else, black, Bolivian, poor, whatever. Today, I have joy and pain, always hand in hand. They can't be separated anymore. The pain is always there, inside my smile. I feel that I'm walking alongside the dead. I feel it's like each one of us goes along in life, sharing our joy with those who are absent. This is what has changed.
Como considera otra persona, no aquellos que ya fueron muertos, sino hoy. ¿Cómo considero yo al chico que está en la calle desocupado, al que está sin laburo, al que está marginado, al que se lo considera distinto porque es judío, porque es homosexual, porque